Hello, this is the podcast series of the Synopsis Laboratory at the University of Cyprus. It is related to issues concerning science of doing science, namely the way that science operates and how it can be studied via the lens of meta-research. We're extremely happy to have Renos Vakis of the World Bank with us, and we would like to welcome you, Renos, and we would like to start by introducing yourself, where your scientific interest started, where you are coming from, and where you are going.
Thank you so much for having me. I guess I must have started my interest in research and actually evidence with my father. My father was horticulture who then actually came to work for the University of Cyprus here. But in the early days, when I was a kid, he used to do experiments with cucumbers and tomatoes and many other crops. And I remember going to the fields and I was introduced to randomized trials back then. And the idea that, okay, the left side may work this way and the right side, we're not doing something and see what happens. So I have a feeling that's where I got my first kind of interest and thirst for doing something similar myself. I'm an economist in training. I studied in the U.S. In areas of development economics, which also gave me a chance to go and live abroad in Peru during my thesis, where I was actually studying farmer decisions and potato production and doing different types of experiments. One thing led to the other. So I'm actually the last few years. So I started a lot of my work from poverty and inequality, distributional issues, and did a lot of work with different types of interventions. And of course, you want to understand, how they work and whether they work and how to improve them. So it's a natural to kind of coincide with this idea of testing and experimenting and evidence. As this kind of evolved, a lot of the work that I was doing was leading me to get into this area of psychology and behaviors and attitudes, aspirations and the role of, motivate, how that helps to motivation and different other kind of psychological factors. So all this to say that has led me to my current job and hopefully the next few years job, which is leading the behavior science team at the World Bank, trying to integrate everything together.
That was a very fascinating description of how you came to be interested. Actually, my father was also is also a farmer, but I didn't really get to be introduced in randomized trials myself via my father. So I would like to ask you about the importance of evidence-based policy and what is the degree to which results from randomized control trials can be translated to actual policy. Given your experience from so many different countries and your actual interaction with policymakers, how would you say about the translation of this kind of evidence, usually experimental, into actual effectual policies? This is the big so-called scaling up question.
Yeah, I've had in many ways been fortunate to sit in the middle, where on one side it's rigor and academia and the research side of things, but on the other side is policy counterparts that want a solution for their programs today, not tomorrow, not in 5 years. And so that has really, pushed, me and pushed, my team to see, well, how can we balance this idea of, research and, science can sometimes take a long time. And so I think over the years, we try to, I find it useful to reframe what we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do is to keep improving a system. So this idea of an iteration, this idea that, today we know something, tomorrow we will know something more, hopefully to improve what we're doing today. And I think that's important in policy because it actually allows you to do rigorous things without this kind of a black and white is today or nothing. And convincing actually policymakers that we're part of an iteration and, you just happen to be here. Maybe you're not here in 2 years, but let's do the best of it. So I think that has helped to bridge some of these kind of this friction between these two concepts. But I see my work as somebody who tries to translate or be part of research today, but incrementally contributing to an evolving kind of an evolution of bringing kind of the next new kind of solutions for the specific problem and keep iterating at that. So we will never get there in a realistic world, but we can always keep improving. And I think that's at the heart of actual policy in the real world, is keep improving.
Thank you so much for your important points in this regard. Synopsis is interested in the problem of reproducibility of research and in the problem of translating research into useful policy. So, based on your experience with so many very important and complex programs that the bank is implementing, what would be sort of your feeling regarding the reproducibility of these programs and their translation into useful policy?
I would say 2-3 things here. One, we need to be asking the right question and what are we trying to solve? And many times when we start working in a project, the policymaker may actually know. If you ask them what they're trying to solve, it's really far away from what they actually need to solve. And I think research can help us think about, what exactly is the problem at heart. Because if you don't have the right problem at heart, you're not necessarily solving what is needed in that specific setting. Which brings me to the second point: replication and learning how to solve something has to do in the real world in a way. You really need to understand the context of a policy. So yes, theory can give us the notion of how you can design a solution about a problem, but the reality is that the context is always going to be different. So part of our job is to find the right question within this context that are related to the main question, and then design for that context. And I think that's the fine difference between thinking of a big policy, and then thinking of its replication that has to be adapted for the context. So this idea of diagnostics of the context before you get to kind of applying anything, I think becomes really crucial.
And about yourself, how do you see the development of your research area in the future, and how does it relate to the most important new areas that come from developments, of course, technological developments, for instance, and social developments, and how do you view yourself within this new research agenda?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned technology, and of course, more and more we are, we live in technology and we have embraced technology. One area that I'm working on right now is this idea of curating existing knowledge in a way that is more relevant or more useful to the specific audience. And concretely, we're trying to think, okay, we do in the World Bank all this amazing research, the academia is doing all this great research. Well, how does that can translate, how do 100 experiences of solving the same problem in different contexts, how can we curate the knowledge of that and give some kind of a jump-starting, kind of a head space to somebody, in a new country who's trying to address that specific problem. And I think things like artificial intelligence, seems to be, it's all the rage right now. But it does seem that it's one of the tools that we can potentially start using more systematically and have this help to go from kind of these huge amounts of data to something that's more manageable, especially in the context of policy where, policymaker has very limited bandwidth, very short deadlines, and have to make important decisions, today. So that idea of how do you curate something that's useful, that doesn't, make mistakes or guide in the right direction without being too prescriptive, I think that's an important question and something that I hope we can contribute in the World Bank or in my team. The second aspect, I think it's important. The world right now is dealing with a lot of issues around trust and a lot of issues around credibility. I think academia has its ups and downs on that. And part of it, I think is driven by technology in the sense that, there is a lot of misinformation at times. As we are forced through technology to go to be in a way in polar kind of a bubbles of interactions. There's confirmation bias that we seek the information that validates our points of view. So we're doing some work on that to try to first understand, how bad it is, but also how to start offering some solutions to actually brings us back in a space where, we're sharing and producing knowledge and be more open to, understanding, but also bring back more this notion of, research as being, and the science method as being, in a way, the way to go forward in our, understanding all the big questions and the small questions in life. So.
Mm-hmm. This is great. Would you say that being based in Cyprus, of course, with the synopsis program, I would like to ask you: do you feel that the insights that you have gained from several countries, or your current work, or the projects that you are thinking for the future? Do you think that they could be applied to the local context and provide us with lessons about Cyprus itself?
Yeah, there's always there is this joke in Cyprus that, and I'm sure it's in other places too, that like Cyprus is at the center of the universe, right? And then and therefore everything evolves or revolves around it. I think especially with my hat of being a behavioral scientist and a lot of the work I've done, all I would say on this is humans are humans. Our brain works exactly the same way. What differs is the context. So to the extent we can understand the Cypriot context, then everything else should be the same, adaptable, replicable, testable. And I hope more is done bringing a lot of these insights to the Cyprus context.
This is a great insight into what can work and what cannot work in different societies, as long as we have a deep understanding of the context. So we are getting a little bit to the closure of today's discussion, and I would like to ask you whether you have any regrets from your career so far, and if you can describe us one particular joy that you have experienced from it.
I'm not a big regret kind of person. The thing I do value, and I hope everybody does, is time. It's the only real resource we have, and it's limited. And you try to do your best with the time you're given. I prefer to look at the opportunities in the future than just being stuck on what I could have done or didn't work on this and that. I have probably hours worth of podcast to tell you about my failures, but I think it's what have made me, be who I am today. So I'm really, grateful for both good and bad. I think for me, joy at work is kind of this notion that I'm getting fired by my counterpart that I'm helping because they don't need me. And I have a few really nice examples there. Like the one I can think of is I used to work in Peru helping the statistical office improve their methodology to measure poverty. And every year for 3-4 years, they had the annual event where the president announces the poverty in the national address, and they would invite me and my colleagues to say something about the process to in a way validate them and give them credibility. And the fifth year, I got the invite, and the World Bank was not mentioned on the card. Like they were doing it alone. And I remembered like it was a really emotional moment for me because okay, they don't need us anymore. Means I've done my job. So the things, moments like that. So it's not about writing the most beautiful paper in the most nerdy journal. It's actually moments where you feel you've had, your contribution actually had an impact. I think that's where joy comes.
This is great, and I think that to a large degree that response to the question has replied to my last question that will follow. But maybe you want to say a few things more about what gives meaning at your work.
I think these days, I really appreciate my team. I think without a good team, you can have amazing ideas, but you need a team, and you need a team that cuts across different disciplines and ways of thinking and even cultures. And I'm quite grateful to have a team that actually can understand sometimes my very esoteric or crazy ideas and translate them into something, and kind of see something kind of materialized. So that gives a lot of meaning and motivation to keep kind of pushing frontiers and thinking about new innovations and push some of the frontiers ahead of us. So I think that's probably something that keeps me very driven and very excited about the job I do, and hopefully the contributions that we do.
Oh, Renos, thank you so much for your time. It's been a great pleasure having you, and all the best to your career and your dreams.
Thank you. It was great having me.